When two people sign a marriage certificate, they rarely realize they are also signing a joint financial contract that will be executed decades later by a federal agency. We tend to look at retirement as an intensely personal solo journey. We track our own 401(k) accounts, calculate our own individual savings rates, and assume that when the time comes to claim Social Security, we are simply pressing a button on our own private dashboard. That is the comforting illusion. The reality is that Social Security was never built for individuals. It is a multi-generational, interconnected family ecosystem. A choice made by one person on a quiet Tuesday afternoon can quietly rewrite the financial survival of the person they love most, long after the original decision-maker is gone. And the terrifying part is that most couples walk right into this trap because they are looking at the wrong set of numbers. To see how this actually plays out behind closed doors, let us step away from the abstract formulas and look at a real-world scenario. Take Robert and Alina. They spent 35 years building a quiet life together in the suburbs. Robert worked as a senior mechanical engineer, bringing home a steady, higher-tier income. Alina spent years balancing part-time administrative work while raising their children and managing the household, which meant her lifetime earnings history was significantly smaller than Robert's. They did everything the financial magazines told them to do. They saved diligently, lived below their means, and reached their late 50s with a fully paid-off mortgage and a healthy retirement portfolio. When Robert turned 62, he started thinking about the finish line. He looked at the Social Security statements sitting on their kitchen counter and saw two separate columns of numbers. To him, it looked like a simple math puzzle, two independent benefit streams waiting to be claimed. He assumed his claiming decision belonged entirely to him. He thought, if I wait until age 70 to claim my maximum benefit, I am locking in the highest possible monthly check for myself. That means more money for both of us while we are alive. It sounds logical, right? It sounds like responsible stewardship. Except Robert missed the invisible gear turning underneath the floorboards. He was optimizing their finances for a two-person household while accidentally detonating a financial bomb for a one-person household. What most people do not realize until it is too late is how survivor benefits actually operate under federal law. When a couple reaches their golden years, they enjoy the combined purchasing power of two separate checks, or one large check and a smaller supplemental spousal benefit. But the moment the higher-earning spouse passes away, the system performs a brutal mathematical reset. The smaller check vanishes completely. The surviving spouse is left with only one benefit, the higher of the two. Pause for a second and let that reality sink in. If Robert delays his claim to 70 to maximize his individual payout, he boosts their joint cash flow during their shared years. But the moment Robert passes away, Alina is left entirely dependent on that inflated single check. If Robert had claimed early out of fear, or if an unexpected health crisis cut his timeline short, Alina's baseline income would plummet overnight by thousands of dollars a month. They were playing a multi-generational game of dominoes, and they didn't even know the tiles were connected. Why do smart, educated professionals make this exact mistake every single day? It comes down to a powerful psychological bias known as present bias combined with deep-seated loss aversion. When we look 30 years down the road, our brains treat our future selves like total strangers. The immediate comfort of seeing a larger joint deposit hit the bank account today feels real, warm, and tangible. The lonely, vulnerable reality of a surviving spouse navigating high inflation, rising property taxes, and soaring medical costs at age 85 feels like a fictional movie script happening to someone else. So, couples anchor their decisions to their joint life expectancy. They calculate the average age of mortality, run the break-even charts, and say, if we both live to 82, waiting until 70 wins the math. But retirement is not an average. It is a distribution curve with sharp, painful edges. What happens if one partner outlives the average by a decade? What happens when longevity risk collides with survivor vulnerability? The system doesn't care about your good intentions. It executes the formula based on the exact timeline you submitted. And this is where another hidden layer of the puzzle comes into play, one that catches even seasoned planners completely off guard. let us talk about the silent tax penalty that compounds the survivor crisis. Most people carry a deeply comforting myth into their retirement years: the belief that Social Security income is a tax-free government gift. For decades, that was largely true. But as tax laws evolved over generations, a mechanism called provisional income entered the framework. If your combined income, which includes your pension distributions, traditional IRA or 401(k) withdrawals, and taxable investments, crosses certain federally mandated thresholds, up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can suddenly be dragged into ordinary income tax brackets. Now, trace what happens to a surviving spouse after the first partner passes away. When a spouse dies, the surviving partner transitions from filing taxes as married filing jointly to single status. Here is where the brutal administrative irony of the tax code reveals itself. While household expenses do not cut in half when you lose a partner, the tax brackets compress dramatically. A single filer hits higher tax brackets at much lower income thresholds than a married couple. If the surviving spouse is trying to live on that inherited survivor benefit while pulling required minimum distributions from a traditional IRA, they can suddenly find themselves pushed into a higher effective tax bracket than they experienced when both partners were alive. The money they thought was safely locked away for retirement is suddenly subjected to a heavy tax friction, precisely when their financial margins are at their thinnest. Robert and Alina had no idea this tax cliff existed. They assumed taxes would naturally drop in retirement because they wouldn't have job salaries coming in. They never imagined that the government's tax treatment of survivor households could act as a secondary drain on their remaining assets. How did a system this complex and unforgiving ever get created in the first place? To find the answer, we have to look backward through history, not at a dry economic ledger, but at the social fabric of America in the 1930s. When the Social Security Act was originally signed into law, the economic architecture of the country bore zero resemblance to our world today. The standard household model was built around a single primary breadwinner, usually a husband, supporting a stay-at-home wife for life. The formulas were engineered for an era where lifelong marriages were the statistical baseline, dual-income professional tracks were rare, and average life expectancies meant most people only collected benefits for a few short years before passing away. The policy designers never anticipated a world of 90-year lifespans, serial divorces, blended families, high cost of living metropolitan areas, and complex multi-asset portfolios. They built a 19th-century bridge designed to carry light horse-drawn carriages, and today, we are trying to drive heavy semi-trucks across it. The rules have not fundamentally changed to match modern realities. Instead, the burden of navigation has been quietly shifted onto the shoulders of ordinary citizens who are expected to decode a multi-layered bureaucratic labyrinth while managing the emotional transition of getting older. And that brings us to the core behavioral trap that drives the whole cycle. It is the illusion of independence. Because our bank accounts are digitized and our investment apps give us real-time feedback, we treat our personal finance decisions as solo acts. We think our 401(k) is ours alone. We think our claiming age is an individual preference, like choosing what time to wake up in the morning. We forget that in the eyes of the system, a married couple is an economic unit whose final chapter is written by the survivor. When Robert finally sat down with an independent fiduciary who mapped out the full multi-decade trajectory, including survivor income modeling, tax bracket compression, and portfolio withdrawal sequencing, the color drained from his face. He realized that his carefully laid plan to wait until age 70, while mathematically optimal for his own personal lifespan, would have left Alina facing a 50% drop in disposable income if he passed away first. They didn't panic. They adjusted. They restructured their claiming timeline so that Robert still captured strong delayed credits, but they incorporated strategic Roth conversions during their early retirement years to drain traditional tax-deferred buckets before mandatory distribution rules kicked in. They built a liquidity buffer to protect Alina against the brutal tax compression of single filing status. They stopped treating Social Security as a game of individual maximization and started treating it as a shared household shield. The lesson here goes far beyond a government check or a retirement calculator. It touches the very core of how we make irreversible decisions under conditions of uncertainty. We lean on simple heuristics because complex systems are exhausting to look at. We optimize for what is comfortable to calculate today, while blinding ourselves to the structural realities of tomorrow. True financial security in retirement does not come from finding a magical age to claim a benefit. It comes from understanding the hidden architecture of the rules you are playing by. Before those rules, write the final chapter for your family. If this journey behind the numbers changed the way you view your own financial future, take a moment to subscribe and pass this along to someone you care about who is currently mapping out their retirement.